Well, hey there team, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to my overview of Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. So it occurs to me that I actually haven't looked at this, at least under the worth your time, worth your money branding that we've been doing these days, but long and short of it is, this is an excellent game. I've gone back and played a couple of hours to refresh my memory, but I've already spent many hours and playthroughs on this game in the past, so it's not exactly fresh for me, but being that we're in January, things are a little bit slower, and this seems to be on a deep sale, I thought I'd take the time to make a video and shout it out. And in case it's not apparent, yes, I highly recommend this. This is fantastic. If you're a fan of the Battlestar Galactica reimagining, I guess you could call it, though, when was that, like 2004 or whatever, even that's starting to get old, then you're in for a treat if somehow you've slept on this. However, I still think there would be very much broad appeal for people that generally like sci-fi, specifically, starships and more Nelsonian broadside batteries of space battleships, that sort of thing. The lore and story here is actually very rich, and while it is set in that setting, it serves as a prequel to the series covering the First Cylon War. More of a sort of uprising of the indentured servitude that is the Cylon robot class. But it still sort of plays out as a hard, fast, first strike kind of scenario where you get hit by a coordinated robot uprising, and that sort of sets the scene for a similar start without giving too much away about the show. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's very, very good, and it still very much holds up. But the idea that you're sort of displaced and disorganized in the wake of being basically king hit by the other team. So the way that it plays out is that you're kind of a faceless, nameless commander of the fleet with this stand-in admiral over your shoulder. There's a whole cast of characters talking in your ear, and they're all fairly likable, and the game is very much focused on the war effort and potentially the politics surrounding it as well. The space that you inhabit is around the 12 colonies. They're all kind of like star sign horoscope named and have all different cultures. And it starts off actually really quite rich. The idea of the Jupiter-class Battlestar just being created, and that's the titular Battlestar in the TV show, at least the new show, that's being retired, sort of old tech. Well, in this being the prequel, it's kind of the first cab off the rank, the construction line. In fact, that Battlestar Galactica specifically has gone missing. Whereas all of the different colonies have kind of signed a handshake agreement to work together and unite against the Cylons, and they're all getting promised a Battlestar each. So part of a sort of tutorialization is you start with one in your fleet, and you get to see how awesome it is, but you kind of hand it off as well, and you go back to having very little, basically. The way it plays out is it's an I go, you go, then synced up, watching the turns play out together at the same time. So you don't see it so often. We had a look at another game coming out of Slytherin called Scramble, which was like a World War II fighter plane dogfighting early access thing, which I really liked, actually. I look forward to seeing what that becomes when it fully releases. But that's the more recent touchstone that I can think of that's kind of similar. So you'll have your fleet of ships, you'll plug in their moves, you can change all sorts of interesting little bits and pieces like their attitudes, you can turn on boosters so they go faster, you can turn up their defenses so they have better scan range and potentially defend against attacks like hacking and that sort of stuff into this firewall. Or you can turn up, your attack, which trades off said defenses, but you get extended range on your guns. And so it's a game of positioning and maneuvering your ships in such a way. Like at the moment, I've played a few hours starting the new campaign up, and between missions you make money, and you've got a shipyard that's mobile that moves around with you. It's kind of your HQ unit, and you build up your fleet with the resources that you get. So I've got a couple of these Adamant. They're kind of workhorse ships. They're a fusion of kind of like a mini cruiser and a mini carrier. But now I've also got these Berserker carriers, and the Manticore seems to be your sort of patrol boat equivalent cruiser with just like a nose cannon. But the Adamants have cool broadsides, and they have Vipers, which are essentially, your fighter planes. It's very much using that World War II battleship come aircraft carrier, mid-century idea of sea power and control. We're not going to go into all of that right now, but if it feels a little bit more like a kind of World War II Midway type game, well, that's because that's the inspirations that this whole world's fiction draws from. So it's really cool just maneuvering around and letting them all biff and play out. The enemy is relentless and will go for your jugular. They will focus fire and missile dump on your weakest target. They will chase it doggedly. It keeps you very honest, and honestly, I think in the back of my mind, at least, I give it a bit of a pass because it is supposed to be this kind of enough is enough AI that's having an uprising. It using every dirty tactic it can come up with is very Skynet of it. I'm not up to it now in my current replay, but I do recall when I played it earlier in the years, having scenarios play out where, like, if you don't protect civilian escort ships and all that, they will absolutely just tear them to shreds. They will fly through things, they'll fly around your fleet and all that just to really get you in the kidneys. And I kind of appreciate it. Not unfair, but maybe cruel. One of the things that needs to be noted is there was this sort of experimental, unique, edgy camera style to the battles in Battlestar Galactica, which you don't really see so much now because it is quite frenetic, these kind of hard snap camera angles and all that. But it was definitely unique to the show. It was interesting at the time, gave it a sort of gritty, not handy-cam kind of feel, but definitely a unique feel, you can say that much. Anyway, when your battles finish up in this, you can let them play out in real time and sit through them in a little cinematic thing. And it's just really polished, and it absolutely captures the essence of the show. So it'll snap around and highlight reel and watch your battle play out, but you've got the screaming battle drums and bagpipe type soundtrack, which again is very much from the original show. They introduced radio chatter in a post-launch update, so you've got all the dudes talking shit on the radio while they shoot down enemy craft, and it's just a really good cinematic spectacle, which is not something you would ever expect from this type of genre. And then coupled with that, there's a whole bunch of DLC, which you can probably pick up for dollars now, and seasons, and it all pushes the story forward into really unusual and interesting directions. And, you know, we don't want to give any of that away, but it sort of gets the best of all worlds. A really fun core loop that plays out kind of top of its field. Interesting, compelling story, sort of a meta layer as far as the fleet management, having to try and keep all the colonies happy in an XCOM funding kind of way. So you have to split your fleets to deal with all the different Cylon fleets. You can't just snowball only. And look, I suppose maybe the battles, you could say, get a bit long in the tooth as you get further into it and the fleets get bigger. You know, a battle can easily blow out to be an hour plus, but it's just so fun and engaging, and it is one of those sort of sunk cost scenarios where by the time you get to that level, you are so invested that it doesn't really offend your little sensibilities. You're in for a penny, in for a pound, as it were. Anyway, look, I don't want to waffle. I think I've covered all the broad points. It's a great game. It still holds up really well. Black Lab Games these days are doing, Battle Sector, which I need to spend some more time with. There's a billion DLCs. I recall thinking to myself that that was one of the best representations of the 40k tabletop essence brought into a video game. Like, we've seen plenty of 40k games and they've been fun, but as far as kind of going close-ish to how the tabletop game plays out, Battle Sector might be one of the closest modern examples. So I think they're finding a lot of success in their current project, but still, this is timeless. I think it's absolutely worth checking out, or at least going back to if you haven't seen it for a while. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.